Hey, welcome. I am sitting in Canvas Church because today we are going to be talking about church photography. Now, everything we talk about today, whether it be gear or settings or anything like that, can be applied to basically any type of indoor low light setting, but we are going to be focusing primarily on churches. So we're going to explore the lobby area, the kids area, and in here in the sanctuary, figure out what the best settings are for cameras, and just see how a day goes in the life of a church photographer. I will note that this is a 2-video series, so in this video we will be going over all of shooting and settings and things like that to do within indoor church photography. In the second video, we will be editing all the photos that I take from today. So if you'd like to watch that video, click on the link in the description below. Let's get to it. When I normally roll into church, I'm carrying my Canon R with a 28mm 1.8 lens and a 85mm 1.8 lens. I really prefer the prime lenses for this kind of shooting situation because it's really dark. They allow the maximum amount of light in. But today, throwing all that out the window for one sole reason, and that is price. So normally the gear that I carry is around $3,000 total with all of the components, and that is a really hard entry price for a church. So today, I'm going to be shooting entirely with this 5D Mark II and a 50mm 1.8 lens. And this body and lens you can get for less than $500. If you'd like a full list of my gear, it's in the description below. But today we will just be using this 5D Mark II with a 50mm lens. No flash, no lens changes, nothing like that. Let's get to it. Welcome to the top of my camera. So when I first arrived for the day, the band is practicing and I like to jump right in and get really close and get on stage. I'll talk about this a little bit more later, but one of my biggest things that I pay attention to when I'm doing church photography is I don't want to get in the way. I don't want to distract from worship. I don't want to take away from the congregant's experience because you don't know. That could be their first time in church. This could be a really life-changing day for them. And so I want to make sure that I get all of my on-stage shots, my close-ups, like this guitar and the drum set that you saw earlier. I want to get all of those right up front during practice so that I don't have to be in the way during worship. I try to get a close-up of every instrument, and I also try to vary my framing. So I'll have something in the center, something on the third. I try to change, I do a lot of vertical and horizontal. I try to just get every single shot that way so that when I'm culling later in Lightroom, I can separate them out and decide which ones I want to keep. When I'm shooting with my Canon R, I would be using the 28mm right now because it gets the crispness and color of the shot, and it's really, really good glass for being close up like this. But like I said earlier, the 50 offers a great closeness while also being affordable. So I will be shooting entirely with that today on my 5D Mark II. Okay, so let's talk about my settings for a minute while you're watching me take photos of the band. I shoot wide open at f-stop 1.8 99% of the time, and this is true for weddings, for church photography, everything. Anytime I have a low light setting, you gotta keep your aperture wide open just to allow the maximum amount of light in. And on top of that, it also adds that creamy, blurry background that just helps separate your subject from the background. I keep my shutter between 125 and 200. Almost all these shots are taken at 125. It's pretty much the lowest that you can go while minimizing motion blur, and so I do get a little bit of blur if someone's swinging an arm really fast or the drumsticks of the drums. But for the most part, I can get in-focus shots with 125, and then sometimes I have to push that up to 200 if I'm trying to get a shot of the drummer or things like that. I use my ISO to adjust for brightness. I always try to keep it as low as possible, however. With my Canon R, generally that will hit right around 400 ISO, and that's like the perfect spot to keep a Canon R. With my 5D Mark II, the sensor isn't quite as good, and so most of these shots are shot at 800. A couple of them are shot at 1000, and then you'll see later on when I go outside, I have to completely change these settings. But for indoor, low-light photography, I do try to keep my settings at 1.8 f-stop, 125 shutter, and then below 800 for ISO, but I do vary the ISO to adjust for brightness. One thing that I feel is really important is getting pictures of volunteers doing their jobs. I think it's a really good way to honor volunteers when you're posting pictures of them on Facebook and you're saying join our serve teams, and they see themselves and they'll share it. So it's just a good natural way to build your volunteer teams. Because I'm the production and online pastor at my church, I am really cognizant of all these different teams and how they work together. So you'll see that a lot of what I do is for social media. Something I really try to focus on is getting a different shot every time. And so we have this online lobby, as you can see here, and that's Pastor Jed talking in the online lobby. And we don't actually have photos of this because it's fairly new to our church. So I wanted to make sure that we have some pictures of him doing that role so that we can talk about it on social media or elsewhere and just encourage people to join online. Okay, and this is the beginning of service. We're jumping ahead a little bit here. So when I'm in the auditorium, like I said earlier, the biggest thing is I don't want to distract from worship. So I always try to stay along the sides. I don't go right up into the front in the middle, except for generally later in the service, I might jump into the front row from the side so that people don't see me going up there. For the most part, I'm on the sides using my 50mm. If I had a longer lens available, like an 85, I absolutely would use that. So I'm headed up into our kids area, and something very important to note is to know your church's policy on kids in photos and videos. Some churches say absolutely not, no photos of kids on the internet. Some say that certain kids aren't, and so that's what our church does. We actually have a list of kids that aren't supposed to be viewed in any pictures or videos on the internet. Besides that, we can totally show faces. So just check with your leadership, make sure you know what the rules are. If you are a leader of your church and you're trying to figure out what to do when it comes to photos, I will link a document in the description that just goes over what we do here at Canvas Church. Check that out, and let's go take some pictures.
Are you sticking your tongue out at him? What?
Julian, you stick your tongue out at me? Upstairs in our K-5 area, it's low ceilings and it's top light, so oftentimes you have a little bit of an issue with lighting. It's not perfect, but I just try to get the most, the action shots. I try to get people interacting. When someone's on stage and they're calling on people and there's hands raised, I really want to get a lot of interaction between kids and between the pastor and the kids. Okay, and we're back in the auditorium. So the prime picture, the picture that you must get, you cannot miss this. If you only get this picture, you will have succeeded, is getting a good picture of the pastor preaching. This is not as easy as it sounds. I have a friend actually who refers to a picture of the pastor smiling as a unicorn because it's very hard when someone's speaking to get a picture of them smiling. So oftentimes during the message, I'll just camp out and wait in a good position with good framing until I can get a shot of him looking good, smiling, not making an awkward face. I do also try to vary these shots because they can get really repetitive week after week, and so sometimes I'll come up and grab a side shot like this. It's really helpful for our media team, especially for YouTube thumbnails, to have different pictures of the message but still of the pastor preaching. And we're back to worship. I would say that worship is the most important part for photos. You don't want to overshoot the message because it's all going to look the same. Get your good pictures and then enjoy. You can see here, at this moment, I noticed that there's a reflection in the drum cage that's super cool of our Christmas trees, and so in a moment I'll grab that picture. As a photographer, it's really useful to know the lighting cues, or at least be familiar with them, know when the bright front lights are gonna come on, all of that. And here you'll see the one time of the day when I go to the middle. I'm actually in the front row right now, right next to my pastor. And if I had multiple photographers, I would love to have someone just stationed there the entire service, but I don't. So I sneak up there in the darkest moment of a song. I think it's really important that as a church photographer or as an event photographer or wedding photographer, that the attendees' experience of the day is the biggest importance, not your pictures. And so at a wedding, I always make sure that my couple is happy and that I am not distracting from their experience of their wedding day. Same thing with worship. I don't want to distract from a new person's experience of worship or someone who's been there for ages. And so I try to stay on the edges. I try to be really respectful of people's space.
Take a picture of your baby.
And out in our lobby, I think it's really important to interact with people. I do primarily Candids, but I will start the day by grabbing photos of people I know. I think it's a really good way to ease into it. I also think it's really important to capture and not create. And what I mean by this is you could pose all of these shots. You could say, okay, we have 10 minutes of downtime before service. Could I have the singer come out here and pose in this specific way? But I think it's more important as an event or church photographer to capture that moment the way it exists. And you do so in the most creative way possible to make it look beautiful. Lastly, just use your best judgment. If a moment in worship is too sensitive, don't take it. If someone's crying, maybe don't use it, but also if you know them, maybe take the picture and then ask them afterwards. Are you okay with this really sensitive moment being online, on social media, things like that? And then a freebie suggestion, don't be afraid to ask other photographers for feedback. I'm always available for feedback. There's photographers in your church or in your community. Feel free to reach out to them. I think it's a lot of photographers want community. And so if you find someone you love on Instagram, send them a picture and be like, hey, can you give me feedback on this picture? Tell me what I did good. Tell me what I did bad. How can I improve? And most of the time, people are absolutely going to respond to you, and they're going to love the fact that you reached out to them in the first place.
Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed being on top of my camera and seeing how to take photos within a church. If you'd like to see me edit all the photos today in Lightroom, click on the video in the description below. If you really liked this video and you'd like to see more like it, hit subscribe and make sure to turn on notifications, and I will see you next time.